All right, good evening. Welcome tonight to our Wednesday evening service. We got the heat going, so it's good. If you'll stand with me, we'll stand and sing our first song of worship tonight. There is power in the blood of the Lamb. Let's sing that out, okay? Would you be free from the burden of sin? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you or evil a victory win? There's wonderful power in the blood. Sing out with me, here we go. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be free from your passion and pride? Here we go. Would you be free from your passion and pride? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Come for a cleansing to Calvary's tide. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be whiter, much whiter than snow? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Sin stains are lost in its life-giving flow. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. On the fourth. Would you do service for Jesus your King? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you live daily his praises to sing? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. All right, you can be seated. We'll give you a rest on Wednesday night. So, next one, are you washed in the blood? Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in his grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you walking daily? Are you walking daily by the Savior's side? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Do you rest each moment in the crucified? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? When the bridegroom comes, will your robes be white? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Will your soul be ready for the mansions bright? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? On the last. Lay aside the garments that are stained with sin. Oh, be washed in the blood of the Lamb. There's a fountain flowing for the soul unclean. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Sing it out with me. Here we go. Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? All right, I don't know about you, but I need that reminder to lay aside the garments that are stained with sin. We don't have to walk in that life anymore. And even though there's that sinward pull, our flesh wants to, but to be reminded that we're washed by the blood, it makes all the difference, doesn't it? It's the hope we have. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Katie, for filling in. My daughter's friends with Katie, and I was like, hey, text Katie. This was like an hour ago. See if she can play a couple songs for us. So thank you for filling in last minute, Katie. It is a blessing to have some young ones coming up that can fill in and put them to work. So thank you for doing that. And this time, we're going to take care of some prayer requests. So anything on your heart, anything you pray for? Peter's ready. What you got, Peter?
Upcoming neck surgery for my mother.
Yeah, continue praying for Miss Rhonda. As she's recovering from her one surgery and now going to be going into her next one on the 24th, right? All right, and I imagine my wife is going to have a list going around for some meals for her. And then, is Miss Linda still on schedule? Christy? Is Christy here? Thought I saw Christy. Maybe not. Okay, she's also on. She was supposed to go on the 22nd, I think, too, for Miss Linda, but she wasn't feeling well, so. All right, we'll be praying for Miss Rhonda. Pray for Miss Rhonda, too, as she's still fighting to get that other vocal cord back, where she may need more surgery on that, so she's still whispering, and just pray for her for that, and she continues to recover, okay? All right, anybody else? Yeah, Glenn?
My sister's sister-in-law, her name is Angie. She OD'd Monday night, so she's in the hospital right now. So just pray for her recovery, but also pray she gets the help she needs when she's out.
Yeah, for sure. What's her name?
Angie.
Angie?
Who was that?
If you couldn't hear Brother Glenn, he was requesting prayer for his sister-in-law, Angie. She's recovering from a drug overdose, so pray for her. All right. Anybody else? Pastor?
I don't know if anybody said it yet, but Linda Hall is having knee replacement on Monday.
That's what she's doing. That's right. So if you couldn't hear Pastor, Linda Hall is having knee replacement on Monday. That is the 22nd. See, I was right. So be in prayer for her, and I believe we will have meals for that too. So we'll get a list going for that as well. All right. Anybody else? Yes, Jackie.
My mom had to get rushed back to the hospital from her surgery. She has a really bad infection.
Okay. Yeah, we were praying for her. She's there, still there now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, can you?
Yeah, so Jackie's requesting prayer for her mom. She had some surgery done, and she's got an infection, so she had to be rushed back to the hospital, so we can pray for her. What's your mom's name again, Jackie?
Linda.
Linda, that's right. All right. Anybody else? David?
Just unspoken for my mom's first night.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Brother Wayne? Unspoken as well? Okay. All right. Micah?
The doctor's supposed to call me tomorrow to potentially schedule a scope for Friday. So I'm praying that that works out and that they'll be able to find what is going on.
Yeah, pray for Micah. He's been battling some stomach issues, so to say the least. So possibly Friday. Hopefully Friday. Prayerfully Friday. He's gonna have a scope, Lynn. Hopefully. All right. Anybody else? Okay.
Oh, my wife's sick.
Miss Melissa's homesick. Pray for Miss Melissa. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I'm gonna call on a couple guys. If you could raise your hand for me if you're interested. Peter, I'm gonna have you pray for. I'll start you from the bottom. Okay. Pray for Miss Melissa Clark. She's homesick tonight. And if you could pray for Micah, he's hopefully going in for a scope Friday to find out what's been going on with him. He's been really sick with his stomach and just a lot of things going on there that he's hopefully can get taken care of. And then if you can pray for the unspoken requests for Brother Wayne and David, okay? Got those for me? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Brother Andrew, if you could pray for Jackie's mom, Linda. It's been rushed back to the hospital with this infection. If you could pray for Miss Linda Hall going in for surgery Monday. And for Glenn's sister-in-law, Angie, as she's battling addiction, and help her pray for healing there. And I'll just give you one more, because there's only one left, if you don't mind. Pray for Miss Rhonda, too. She's recovering from the one surgery, getting ready to go in for her other one on the 24th, which will be a little bit more, she'll be down for the count after that, so a little bit more serious. So pray for her, and thank you, guys.
God, we thank you for us being able to be here tonight in this nation, Lord. Thank you for giving us the ability of modern marvels to allow us to stay warm in these cold times, Lord. We just ask for all those people who could not be here tonight, whether due to sickness or other reasons, Lord, like Miss Melissa and others. We ask that you would be with them and you would help them to get through whatever they're going through, Lord. As well, we ask for all the unspoken tonight. We don't know what's going on, Lord, but you do. And you know what needs to be done in order for those situations to be resolved or be helped. Finally, we ask for Micah, Lord, that you be with him and the doctors so they can figure out what's going on and they can help him to get better, Lord. As well, be with the families who are going through the cold tonight, Lord. Again, not other people in other places don't have the same technology and everything we do, and some people are going through some very awful things, Lord. Thank you again, and be with Pastor and be with the next one of praise.
God, as we continue to pray tonight, Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity that we have to gather here, to worship, Lord, to hear from your word, to sing to you, and also, Lord, to just bring these requests to you that are on our hearts tonight. God, for these requests that were mentioned, Lord, I just pray for Glenn, Lord, and his sister-in-law who's in the hospital right now. God, I pray that you would just watch over that situation, that she would get the healing that she needs, Lord, and Lord, that she would come to know you and the hope that you offer, Lord. I pray that you would just be with Glenn and the family as well during this time. Lord, I pray also for Jackie's mom, that she had to go back because of an infection, that you would just watch over her, Lord, that you would bring healing in that situation, that you would watch over the doctors and nurses as they just discuss treatment, Lord, going forward. I pray that you would work in that situation. God, I pray also for Miss Rhonda as she's going back in for follow-up surgery, that you would just watch over that situation. Lord, I know that that one will have a longer recovery time, and I pray that you would just watch over her and strengthen her during that time. I pray that you would use us as a church family to encourage her and to help her in whatever way that we need to. Lord, I pray also for Linda Hall, as she'll be going in for surgery, that you would just watch over her, be with the doctors and nurses in all of these situations, God, that you would just watch over them and give them the wisdom that they need, Lord, and that they would have healing and recovery according to your will. Lord, we thank you again for who you are and all that you do for us. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right. Good to see you all here tonight, braving the cold. I wasn't too worried about us driving here. Well, I walked, but I wasn't too worried about people driving here as much as I was the buses, and if something were to happen on that bus. And so that's why we canceled things. We typically follow Hazel Park Schools, not necessarily every time for everything, but they canceled early yesterday, and we made the decision. I made the decision that we were just going to do that. Yes, make that call early so you would know that in advance. But anyway, let's see here. Brian, what announcements do you have up there? Women of the Word tomorrow morning. If you're coming to that, they're going to be meeting in the lobby. I know it's a little chilly in here. The heat has been running, and it's really cold outside, so it's not been able to keep up as much. But they're going to meet in my office actually tomorrow, so they'll have good heat in there. Clothes Closet is open on the 23rd. That's this Saturday? That's next Tuesday. That's what that is. Okay. Next Tuesday from 6 to 8. Teen volleyball activity is coming up on the 3rd. And you can see Brother Andrew with questions. But do they need to sign up by a certain time?
Just before we leave.
Before you leave. All right. And then Kent and Sandra Pool. I was looking at that picture Sunday. I thought, man, that is really, really an old picture. How many of you know the Pools? A few of us do, I think. But they're really good people. He's a great preacher. And that's it. Okay, one other announcement. Our kids had delayed start the other day for school because of the cold. And so due to the cold temperatures coming up this weekend, we're going to delay start Sunday evening service at 7 o'clock. So I'm being serious. But not about the cold, but we are going to delay start the Sunday evening service. I've been really thinking a lot about this the last couple days. There's a Lions game on, the first time in 23 years that they've played in this game. I don't know if they've ever gone past this game, but and I know that we have a lot of people some people are just not going to come to church, and that's their choice, right? What are you laughing at, Peter? And that's their choice. There are some people, some of you, who will be here, but you'll be checking your phone during church. And some of you will be wishing you were checking your phone, but your dad took it away from you.
It should be over.
So, no, it won't be. So anyway, so I want to do this because I want to do this for the people who are going to be here, who love church, who want to be fed, who want to sing and worship, but also want to enjoy the game. So we're going to start that Sunday at 7 o'clock, just like a Wednesday night service instead of at 6 o'clock. This one time, don't get used to it, okay? I don't think you have to get used to the Lions playing well, but this is not something I'm going to do because every time that there's a game. But, yep, I know. And church is at 6, and games are typically 3 hours and 15 minutes to 3.5 hours. So we're gonna do this one time. So I'm not asking for everybody else's opinion because I want you to be mad at me if you're mad about it. And then come talk to me if you're mad at me. Don't just get mad about it. Okay, so it's on me 100% if it doesn't go over well. I'll learn my lesson. So anyway, that's the plan for this Sunday. We're going to do that this one time. Let me just tell you my thought process because I feel like I have to justify this. I want people to be focused on church when they're here. The Bible doesn't give us a Sunday evening. It doesn't tell us we have to meet Sunday evenings, but I want us to understand that church is more important than football. It doesn't matter if it's a Super Bowl, church is more important than football. We're going to have church. We're not going to let football stop us from having church. But I called the Lions, asked them to move the game an hour earlier, and they said no. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. But I wanted, I just feel like I prayed about this, honestly. I really have. And I just feel like this is what we're going to do this time. So that's it. If you have questions about it, you can ask me, but I'm not going to change my mind. All right. We're going to be in Job chapter 29. We started chapter 29 last time. I have a couple jokes here because Peter's been waiting for 3 weeks to get his joke told. All right. He was telling me that this was from a comedian named Brian Regan. He said, if I were ever rich enough, one thing I'd like to do is buy a professional sports team in Miami and rename it Then when they ask me what the new name is, I can tell them, well, it's not the heat, it's the humidity. There you go, Peter. And then I got a couple of jokes today from Joe Hall. He said, waking up this morning was an eye-opening experience.
Okay, I guess that.
Yeah. How about this one? And this one hit home with Joe, if you know Joe. You really got to hand it to short people, mainly because they can't reach it. So, all right. Yeah. All right. So, Job chapter 29. Let me recap real quick, just the beginning of chapter 29. Chapters 27, 28 are the first monologue of Job. And we finished that, and I went ahead and started chapter 29. So let's begin. Verse 1, we're going to just read and comment quickly. Moreover, Job continued his parable and said, oh, that I were as in months past or in the days when God preserved me. He's thinking back now, thinking about what life was like before his turmoil. Verse 3, when his candle shined upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness. As I was in the days of my youth, when the secret of God was upon my tabernacle, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were about me, when I washed my steps with butter, and the rock poured me out rivers of oil. When I went out to the gate through the city, when I prepared my seat in the street, the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the aged arose and stood up. The princes refrained talking and laid their hand on their mouth. The nobles held their peace, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard me, then it blessed me, and when the eye saw me, it gave witness to me. So Job is saying, I would go into the places to speak, and the kids would hide and watch, and the aged men, the elders, they would stop and they would listen, and they didn't even have a response. And so he kind of tells about the way he was respected or seen in his community. Then in verse 12, because I delivered the poor that cried and the fatherless, to him that had none help him. The blessing of him that was ready to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My judgment was as a robe and a diadem. Bonnie texted me last week. I said, what's that song? Breathe forth the royal diadem and crown him Lord of all. And she texted me what the name of that song was the next day. I don't remember what it was. All hail the power. That's it. All hail the power. So a diadem is a royal headwear like a crown. Verse 15, I was eyes to the blind, and feet was I to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and the cause which I knew not, I searched out. And I break the jaws of the wicked and pluck the spoil out of his teeth. That's as far as we got last time. But I kind of read to you also, or quoted to you, my version, because I couldn't remember it exactly, but James 1:27, that the pure religion and undefiled before the Father is this, that you visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction and remain unspotted from the world. And that's kind of what Job is showing here, that Job had pure religion. He had true religion. And he did those things. So at the first part, he told us about how he was seen in his community. In the second part, he told us how he used his resources to help others. Now, verse 18. Then I said, I shall die in my nest and shall multiply my days as the sand. My root was spread out by the waters, and the dew lay all night upon my branch. So Job is still remembering his former days, and in those former days, he thought, man, I am going to die in my nest. I'm going to die in my nest egg, all this stuff that I have. And I'm gonna live, and I'm gonna live a long time. My days will be multiplied as the sand. My root was spread out by the waters. And he's saying that I am gonna be well fed. I am not gonna wither. I mean, as a tree that is planted by the waters. And so the picture here is that he was gonna be strong. Verse 20, my glory was fresh in me, and my bow was renewed in my hand. Unto me men gave ear and waited, and kept silence at my counsel. After my words, they spake not again, and my speech dropped unto them. So he's going back to being strong, being respected in his community. Men listened to him, and when he spoke, they stopped and listened. There was nothing left to add. They kept their silence. They didn't speak again. He was the final word. People listened. So his wisdom was above others. Verse 23, and they waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouth wide as for the latter rain. The men in the city, they were thirsty for his wisdom. They wanted to hear what he had to say. And as the latter rain was a blessing because it came after dryness, they listened intently, and because they wanted to take in what they could from him. Verse 24, if I laughed on them, they believed it not. And the light of my countenance they cast not down. I chose out of their way, and sat chief, and dwelt as a king in the army, as one that comforteth the mourners. So basically he's saying, like if I joked with someone, if I made a joke about someone, or if I laughed at them, people didn't believe it. You see, they took him seriously. They came to him for direction, and then they asked for his advice, and then they took it and did it. Many of you have experienced this too, but as a pastor, I get people that will ask my advice and they don't listen to it, and maybe sometimes my advice wasn't good, but he had such great wisdom that people asked his advice and did it. And so he was once so greatly respected, and he used his influence, he used his wisdom to help others. He didn't use it for himself. If there could be then, for a man that behaved in such a way and had such great wealth, had such great blessings from God, if there could be a turnaround for a man like Job, okay? He's blessed, 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 and then boom, down to the bottom. If that could happen for a man like Job who was righteous, and he's making that case, then who is safe from this? Who is safe from such turmoil? None of us are. But we don't go through turmoil to kill us. We go through turmoil to make us stronger. We go through turmoil to make us better, to make us rely on the Lord more, to grow us in our faith. Now, when we come to chapter 30, Job here, now he gives a contrast to the other kind of man, not the kind of man like him. Verse 30, but now they that are younger than I have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. Basically, here he's saying the young men, they used to respect him. When he was around, they hid. They watched him. But now young men are mocking him, and it's not the young men of respectable men. These are the young men, the sons that he wouldn't even put their dads with the dogs. That's how little respect he had for them. But now these are the kind of men whose sons are leveling attacks at him. Verse 2. Yea, whereto might the strength of their hands profit me, in whom old age was perished. So these men were of no use. They're in their, whether it was their laziness or some other reason, their work was unprofitable. And in whom old age was perished. He's saying that their time, their effectiveness was no more. It doesn't mean that they were old, but it means that they had gotten to that point where there was no profit in them because of their wickedness. Verse 3, for want and famine they were solitary, fleeing into the wilderness in former time, desolate and waste, who cut up mallows by the bushes and juniper roots for their meat. So, where do you go when you're in famine? Well, you go to someone who has food. But what does it say here? It says for want and famine, they were solitary. They stayed by themselves. They didn't even go to the right place to get what they needed. Verse 5. They were driven forth from among men. They cried after them as after a thief. To dwell in the cliffs of the valleys, in the caves of the earth, and in the rocks. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they were gathered together. They were children of fools, yea, children of base men. They were viler than the earth. And so Job here is continuing to describe the type of man who was considered, through whom he was considered lower than by the rest of society. The rest of society, Job was once well respected. Now he's mocked and he is ridiculed by men who were the lowest of society. But Job is saying he is even lower now in the eyes of society. And so these were men who were considered to be worthless and displayed themselves to be a base sort of a man. But now they are the fathers of his loudest mockers. Now, he has described these men clearly in verses 1 through 8. But now he would describe how they treated him. Verse 9. And now I am their song, yea, I am their byword. So Job is not the focus of their songs and of their conversations. He is now the focus. Job does not specify the content of their songs and conversations in this verse, but wicked men sing wicked songs and have wicked conversations. So if wicked men are singing songs about Job, we can assume that they were wicked songs. If they're having conversations about Job, we can assume that they were wicked conversations. The adjectives, he was the subject of their songs and their conversations, but the adjectives were not given. We can only imagine. Verse 10, they abhor me, they flee from me, and spare not to spit in my face. So, why did they abhor him? They didn't have reason to, other than what they saw him go through. You see, they abhorred him for his lot in life, not for his character. When we respect someone for their results, we will respect the wrong people and we will reject the right people. If you just look at, and I've been guilty, I've seen this happen where you see, especially as a pastor, if you are, if you are into, I don't know, whatever you're into. Maybe you're a mechanic, right? So John, I know John, there's just certain people on his guys he likes to watch on YouTube who know certain things and he learns from them, okay? And so as a pastor, I do the same thing, but I will go and watch people and I'll go, man, this guy, man, he's effective, his church is growing, they're seeing people saved and baptized, and you begin to exalt that man, and then that man falls. But we thought he was so good because of the results. And then there's that little preacher at the little street, that little church that they don't even have recordings of his preaching. But you wouldn't want to hear him anyway because there's a reason that his church is small. And it may be that that's the godly man that we ought to be looking at instead of the one that had the great success. And so Job, people were looking at him and they had disdain for him because of his results of where he was right then. And so the Bible says here that they spit in his face. Verse 11, because he hath loosed my cord and afflicted me, they have also let loose the bridle before me. So since God had afflicted Job and removed his place in society, the people took back the respect they once showed him. They stopped showing respect because they stopped. I'm sorry, I'm getting a message here, and I do want to read this to you. But they stopped showing respect because of what they saw as results or outcome. I do want to read you this message because it was a prayer request that just came through for Don Kraft. Hold on. There it is. Gail said, prayers needed. Don fell this morning. He slid off the bed around 5 a.m. 5 a.m. their time is probably just a couple of hours ago. I'm not sure exactly what time it is there. We called 911 to help him get out of bed. So he seems to be okay. There's no blood or bruising. But there's still planning to leave on 23rd. So we do want to keep them in our prayers as they're preparing to head back here. But I saw that he had fallen. I wanted to catch up on that. All right, verse 12. Upon my right hand rise the youth. They push away my feet, and they raise up against me the ways of their destruction. They mar my path. They set forward my calamity. They have no helper. They came upon me as a wide breaking in of waters. In the desolation they rolled themselves upon me. Terrors are turned upon me. They pursue my soul as the wind, and my welfare passeth away as a cloud. So these men and their sons are now oppressing Job. They attempted to cause him to fall and to be destroyed. They chose to bring calamity, to bring further turmoil in his path. And so they pursued him. They pursued his soul. They pursued his life. And Job felt that his welfare was passing away. He probably once felt indestructible because he had everything, and now he feels that is passing away. Verse 16. And now my soul is poured out upon me, and the days of affliction have taken hold upon me. My bones are pierced in me in the night season, and my sinews take no rest. So in his mind, the affliction is just so great. In fact, it's just too great. And his bones and muscles could not rest, and he couldn't get any relief aside from the pain. Think about all the pain just from the sores. Think about the things that he was dealing with physically. The things that were brought on by Satan, the emotional, the physical, spiritual, all these things were being affected by the fact that he couldn't get rest and recover. If you don't get sleep, it's going to affect you not just physically, but it's going to affect you emotionally, and it will even affect you spiritually. And so that's what Job seems to be dealing with. Verse 18, by the great force of my disease is my garment changed. It bindeth me about as the collar of my coat. So it seems to me that Job is speaking literally here. It may be that the blood and other fluids of his body are reacting to the infection, and it has stained his garments. I mean, if he's got garments on it and these sores are still oozing out, whatever they ooze out, then it could have affected. I think he is actually speaking literally there, and it seemed as though it was around his neck, tight like a collar, from verse 18. Verse 19, he hath cast me into the mire, and I am become as dust and ashes. I cry unto thee, and thou dost not hear me. I stand up, and thou regardest me not. So in verse 19, he refers to God. Job felt that God had cast him into the mire. He couldn't see behind the scenes. He couldn't. But what was worse than even thinking that God had brought this on him, that God had cast him into the mire, is that Job was crying out to God, but he didn't believe God was hearing him. And, you know, if you call your child's name in the house and they don't respond, you think they don't hear you, right? And then you go, I called you 4 times, and they were like, I answered, but I couldn't hear you, so I thought you weren't listening. And that's how Job feels. God, I've been calling you, and I can't hear you talking back to me. And so it says that he stood up, probably meaning in prayer, but he felt that the Lord wasn't hearing him. Verse 21, thou art become cruel to me. With thy strong hand thou opposeth thyself against me. Job felt in chapter 21 that God had been gracious to him. But, he says, but here it says, art become. It denotes his belief that something has changed. He now feels that God has become cruel to him and opposes him. So over the time of not getting the answers and not getting the relief that he was seeking, he said, thou art become cruel to me. Thou liftest, verse 22, thou liftest me up in the wind, and thou causest me to ride upon it, and dissolveth my substance. Jesus told Peter, he said, Satan desires to have you. He desires to sift you as wheat. Many years after the time of Job is when Jesus said this to Peter. It was not God sifting Job, right? We know from chapters 1 and 2, this is not God sifting Job, this is Satan sifting Job. God could have stopped Satan, but in God's perfect plan, both with Job and with Peter, God was using their situations to work out things for good. God works all things for good to them that love him, that are the called according to his purpose. And so he was working out these things in their lives, and it would work out for good. Verse 23, for I know that thou wilt bring me to death into the house appointed for all living. Job felt his death was coming imminently, and he probably has felt that for a while. He didn't know exactly what lay beyond that. In Sunday evening's message this week, I'm going to be talking about Sadducees, and they don't believe in the resurrection. Jesus says to them, he's like, you don't know the scriptures, right? If they went back and read the prophets and read these books of poetry and the books of wisdom, if he would go back and read that, he would see that they would see that there is an afterlife and that there is a resurrection. Job didn't know exactly what that meant. He didn't know, but he did know this. If you remember, he said that he knows that he's going to see his Redeemer. Verse 24, howbeit he will not stretch out his hand unto the grave, though they cry in his destruction. Did not I weep for him that was in trouble? Was not my soul grieved for the poor? He says, even when he would hear the cry of the poor, his soul was grieved. So how then, think about this, if Job is saying, I'm a righteous man, I hear the cries of the poor, and I go help them, what does it mean that I am crying out to my God and he's not helping me? That's tough. I imagine it's tough for him to deal with and for him to understand. He says, verse 26, when I looked for good, then evil came upon me, and when I waited for light, there came darkness. Job thought he knew what he needed. He said, I looked for good. He said, I needed good. But then God allowed evil. He thought he needed light, but God allowed darkness. Now, was all this necessary for a man who was already righteous? You remember, this is not God correcting his child. This is God testing his child. And so, why was all of this necessary? And we may not understand exactly why, but we can know that God knew what he was doing in Job's life. The good God was working in Job's situation, and it was not just good for Job, but it was good for us to read. Like, that's why we have this here. I met a guy yesterday picking up something on Craigslist. That didn't work. But anyway, I met a guy, and we ended up talking for about a half hour, and his son, when his son was 3.5 years old, he was carrying his son down the stairs, and he fell. And his son now has cerebral palsy and is blind, and he's 20 years old. And he was telling me, and he's a Catholic guy, but he was telling me, we talked about Job a little bit. I told him, I'm actually teaching through that on Wednesday nights, but he was telling me that, like, in his mind, the right thing was that his son be healthy, and the right thing is that his son not have blindness and his son not have cerebral palsy, but he's like, this is the happiest kid you'll ever meet in your life. Is it possible that God knew what he was doing when he allowed that man to fall down the stairs with his son? It's traumatic. And none of us ever wants to see that happen, but does God still work good in it? What would that boy's life have been like had that not happened? Because the dad tells me he was not a good guy before that, and that he changed with that. Now he needs the gospel. I mean, we had some talks. I don't know whether he's saved or not. But what would have happened? What would that boy's life have been like? We don't know. But we can assume that God had a reason. He allowed things to happen for a purpose. Can God take our turmoil and turn it into a blessing to us and to countless others? And the question is, of course he can. Now, verse 27, my bowels boiled and rested not. The days of affliction prevented me. So everything inside of Job was turmoil. His organs, everything inside of him. And it is figurative, I think. But I wonder if his pain felt that way. Now, it says that my bowels boiled and rested not. The days of affliction prevented me. Now, in our modern English, we think prevented means to hinder something or to stop something from happening. But in that Old English, it meant to go before. And so here's what he's saying, that the days of affliction came before me. In other words, they confronted him as he never expected. He never expected to have these things happen. Verse 28, I went mourning without the sun. I stood up and I cried in the congregation. I am a brother to dragons and a companion to owls. And so he mourned. He says, I mourned without the sun. One of the places that that is good for people to be, typically during hard times or during health issues or during pain, is to be in the sun. But he says, I did it without. He cried out to all who would hear. His words were like fire and like a dragon. Verse 30, my skin is black upon me, my bones are burned up with heat. His body's covered with sores. Everything inside of him burned with pain and fever. Verse 31, my harp is also turned to mourning, and my organ into the voice of them that weep. These instruments that he talks about were used to praise the Lord. They were instruments that, as instruments should be used, is to give God glory and to give him praise. That's what they were being used for, but then they became instruments of mourning. Now we come to chapter 31. And I do want to try to cover this. We'll see if we get through it. It's a long chapter, 40 verses, but we'll see if we can get through it. And we're going to divide this. Chapter 31, here's what G. Campbell Morgan said about that. This whole chapter is occupied with Job's solemn oath of innocence. It was his final and explicit answer to the line of argument adopted by his three friends. So this is Job making his argument about his life and how he is innocent. Now, up to this point, the first 30 chapters, they've told us that Job was a righteous man. Even the Lord said he was righteous. But now in chapter 31, Job tells us that righteous life, what a righteous life looks like. Now, I want to finish this night because next week, for those of you who are in here, we're going to get into Elihu, the fourth guy that speaks and speaks into Job's life. Let's see if we can skim through or make it through chapter 31. Now, verse 1, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? Job's defense begins with a verse that all men should know. I think every man should know this verse. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? We ought to know it, we ought to understand it, and we ought to adopt it for ourselves. This is a great verse, okay? Now, we want to keep it in context, but even in context, he's telling us what happened, how he stayed righteous. Now, Job's covenant wasn't like with his eyes. He wasn't like making an agreement with his eyes, and then if he failed, then his eyes would be mad at him or something like that. He made a covenant with his eyes. It means he made a covenant with God concerning his eyes. He would not allow impure thoughts to enter his mind because of the things he was looking at. Why then should I think upon a maid? That means that it's a young woman. This is difficult in our day. You know, I was reading that even in Job's day, and archaeologists have found many paintings and drawings that were pornographic. Pornography is not a new thing. However, what is new is how easily it is accessible and how it is everywhere, how it's on billboards, and how it is on vehicles and things like that. So women dress immodestly because here's why. The men won't stand in their homes. The dads won't stand in their homes. Why do girls dress immodestly? Why do women dress immodestly? Why do wives dress immodestly? Because the men in their homes won't stand and say, I know you're not going to understand this because you think differently than men do, but this is not acceptable. Now, we can't blame our sins on someone else. If you lust, you can't blame that on someone else. Okay? You can't say, well, if she hadn't worn that, no, that doesn't matter. You can't blame that on someone else. So we can't blame someone else, but beware that Satan's not using you to tempt someone else to sin. Because then you're wrong too, just like the person who is doing the lusting. It's everywhere in our world. So does that man, does he attempt to mandate every woman's clothing? I don't remember what it was about. Somebody texted me something today. And I said, yeah, I can only control my family. I can't control you. It's not my job. I can teach, I can preach, I can ask you, I can, if we have teen activities, Brother Andrew can say, no, that's not acceptable. But we can't control people. But what that man can do is shield his eyes. I talked about this in Sunday school years ago, and people would use this language for a long time after. You got to bounce your eyes. You see something you shouldn't see, you bounce your eyes. You see something, you bounce your eyes. Ladies, if you're looking at me like I don't have a clue what you're talking about, there's a book, if you're a married woman, that you should read. My wife can tell you about it, and it will help you to understand. Now, in fact, we use a software on our phones and computers and stuff. And one of them that I looked into and that we tried for a little while was called Covenant Eyes. That's where it came from. Job chapter 31, verse 1. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? All right, let's move on. Verse 2. For what portion of God is there from above, and what inheritance of the Almighty from on high? We are only entitled. Here's what he's saying. What portion of God is there from above? You're only entitled to your portion. When you go outside of those bounds, you're stealing something that doesn't belong to you. And you go, well, no, it's an image on a computer, or it's a picture somewhere. I'm not taking anything from you. No, you're taking something that doesn't belong to you, and you're guilty. He says here, what inheritance of the Almighty from on high? You only are entitled to what God's given you. You're not entitled to those other things. Verse 3. Is not destruction to the wicked and strange punishment to the workers of iniquity? So all those things, they lead to destruction. Doth not he see my ways and count all my steps? Yep, God sees it. Even when no one else does, we want to believe that God is not watching, but he is. So verses 1 through 4, he talks about walking in purity. Verse 5, walking in honesty. If I have walked with vanity, or my foot hath hasted to deceive, let me be weighed in an even balance, that God may know mine integrity. So when it came to being honest, Job was not afraid to be put on the righteous scales of God. He wasn't claiming that he was sinless or that he had never lied. He's saying, I do not have sin in my life. It has all been confessed. I'm not going through this because God's trying to get my attention. He has my attention. Verse 7, if my step hath turned out of the way, and mine heart walked after mine eyes, and if any blot hath cleaved to mine hands, then let me sow and let another eat. Let my offspring be rooted out. So he's so confident about his honesty and about his blamelessness that he's willing to bring a curse on himself, that he's going to sow and let someone else eat. So, verse 9, we see the walking in faithfulness. If my heart have been deceived by a woman, or if I have laid wait at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind unto another, and let others bow down upon her. For this is a heinous crime, yea, it is iniquity to be punished by the judges. For it is fire that consumeth to destruction, and would root out all mine increase. Some have compared this chapter 31, to the Sermon on the Mount. And how, especially in chapter 6, when Jesus talked about these things, he talks about purity of mind and purity in marriage. He says unfaithfulness is a heinous crime. You know, it used to be illegal to be unfaithful. However, those laws could not remain in our culture today because all the lawmakers are guilty of it. Not all of them. Not all of them. Far more than we know, I'm sure. Job says that it is a fire that consumes to destruction. And if he had been guilty, then it would root out his increase. So men today live trying to pay their way through life while much of their income goes to alimony and child support. I think that's what he's saying. For it is a fire that consumeth to destruction and would root all mine increase. Sin costs money. Sin costs far more than you want to pay. There's an old song, it'll take you further than you want to go, and it'll cost you more than you want to pay. Verse 13, walk ethically. If I did despise the cause of my manservant or of my maidservant when they contended with me, what then shall I do when God riseth up? And when he visiteth, what shall I answer him? Did not he that made me in the womb make him? And did not one fashion us in the womb? So here he's talking about his treatment of servants. How do you treat someone who is in an inferior position to you? Many people, they treat those in a superior position, whether it's a boss or a leader of some sort. They treat them with respect in order to earn favor, or simply because they're fearful for their job or whatever. But how do you treat those in an inferior position? That is one of the ways that your character is revealed. And Job gives us two reasons to treat servants well. First, he says, what do I do in verse 14? When God riseth up and when he visiteth, what shall I answer him? So when God visits, what will I say to him? Think about that. We are inferior to God, right? I hope you understand that. We're inferior to God. So if we treat those inferior to us unkindly, then God should treat us unkindly. That's what we deserve, right? Now, secondly, the same God who made me made the servant. And we are equal, and we are made both in the image of God. More on the image of God Sunday morning. Verse 16. If I have withheld the poor from their desire, or have caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or have eaten my morsel myself alone, and the fatherless hath not eaten thereof. Now, I referenced this verse earlier, but pure religion undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So here, Job talks about his charity to three kinds of people: fatherless, widows, and the poor. He talks about the fact that he has not oppressed those who are easiest to oppress, and he has been generous with those whom he had the opportunity to help. Verse 18, for from my youth he was brought up with me, as with a father, and I have guided her from my mother's womb. If I have seen any perish for want of clothing, or poor without covering, if his loins have not blessed me, if he were not warmed with the fleece of my sheep, if I have lifted up my hand against the fatherless when I saw help in my gate. So here he's talking about those who need food, those who need clothing to survive. He has been blessed, so it was a blessing to others. Verse 22, then let mine arm fall from my shoulder blade, and mine arm be broken from the bone. For destruction from God was a terror to me, and by reason of his highness I could not endure. So once again, Job welcomes a curse on himself if these things are not true. If he didn't help people, if he didn't have people that were wearing the wool of his sheep, if he didn't have people that were eating his food, he says, then this curse can come on me. Now, verse 24, walk in right worship. If I have made gold my hope, or have said to the fine gold, thou art my confidence. If I rejoice because my wealth was great, and because mine hand had gotten much. So Job did not want his wealth, did not worship his wealth, and was not dependent on gold. Verse 26, if I beheld the sun when it shined, or the moon when it walking in brightness. He didn't worship the sun and the moon like many of the pagans around him. Verse 27, my heart hath been secretly enticed, or my mouth hath kissed my hand. This also were an iniquity to be punished by the judge, for I should have denied the God that is above. You and I have a lot of scripture to teach us how to live, how to worship right, how to walk right with God, how to live in purity, how to walk in our marriages. We have been given scripture to teach us, and not just outward, right? Because he says here in verse 27, or my mouth hath kissed my hand, okay, outward action, but is of the heart, my heart hath been secretly enticed. So he's saying that he knows, Job, who has no scripture, right? We believe, and it's probable, that the book of Job was the first book penned. It doesn't mean these are the earliest events of the earth. It means that this was the first one penned. So Job did not have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd, Samuel, 1st and 2nd. I'm going to stop there. But I can do it all the way through. I might get one of those Z ones messed up at the end. But he's saying that he has learned that my heart hath been secretly enticed, or my mouth hath been kissed by my hand. He said, this also were an iniquity to be punished by the judge, for I should have denied the God that is above. And Job knows these things. Why? Because he's had revelation from God. Okay, that we don't get that anymore because we have the full revelation of God in our hands here. But he also got it from simply the universe and conscience and things like that. Verse 29, walk without retribution. If I rejoice at the destruction of him that hated me, or lifted up myself when evil found him, neither have I suffered my mouth to sin by wishing a curse to his soul. If the men of my tabernacle said not, oh, that we had of his flesh, we cannot be satisfied. So, how one treats those that hate him and want to harm him is also a great revealer of character and of godliness. Job said he didn't wish evil or cursing on those who hated him. I've heard so many people who claim to be good, godly Christians, but yet they'll say, oh, that person, I tell you what, if they ever come around me, I'm going to... That's not righteous, okay? That's not showing forgiveness. Verse 32, the stranger did not lodge in the street, but I opened my doors to the traveler. He gave shelter to the stranger. Verse 33, if I covered my transgressions as Adam, by hiding mine iniquity in my bosom, did I fear a great multitude, or did the contempt of families terrify me, that I kept silence and went not out of the door? You see, Job's friends, they had accused him of hiding sin. They believed that was the cause of his suffering. But he's basically saying here, I live openly. I go to the door when somebody knocks. I don't hide things. I don't have hidden things in my life. I have transparency in my life. And he says, I didn't keep silence. It's impossible for a man to live such a transparent life and not to eventually make his sins known. Verse 35, Job requests the ear of God. Oh, that one would hear me, behold, my desire is that the Almighty would answer me, and that mine adversary had written a book. So as Job desires God to hear his case, he's confident, even though he knows that his adversary had written a book, or he had written a large legal brief against him, I think is the picture. He says he wants to stand in the court of God, even though he knows that the prosecution has a book of accusations that they're going to bring against him. Verse 36, surely I would take it upon my shoulder and bind it as a crown to me. I would declare unto him the number of my steps. As a prince would I go near unto him. If my land cry against me, or that the furrows likewise thereof complain. If I have eaten the fruits thereof without money, or have caused the owners thereof to lose their life. Job is so confident in his innocence that he was willing to accept the determination of the righteous judge. Have you ever been driving down the road and you pass a cop and your heart starts beating really quick and all the blood rushes out of your face and you're like, why do we do that? Because we know we're guilty, right? We know that there's a reason he could pull us over and we could get... I got pulled over. I don't know if I told you guys about this. I know I told my wife. I got pulled over a couple months ago in the Hazel Park Police Department parking lot. I had gone to the library. It's in the same parking lot. I'd gone to the library. I get out. I back out, and I go. And somebody, one of the police officers, was coming out of the police department, and I thought, I was wondering if it was a guy. No, Cameron, who is Jerlene Thompson's grandson, and he's a police officer here in Hazel Park. And I was like, oh, whatever. No, all right. And I took off and I started going. Well, I mean, I'm like pulling down the parking lot, and a woo pulls up behind me, you know. And I'm like, here's what I was like, huh? Maybe it's Cameron saying hi. I was not scared a bit because I knew I hadn't done anything. But I did back into one of their sergeant's cars apparently when I was backing out, and I was looking to see if it was Cameron coming out. I bumped the car, and I didn't know it, and I took off. And she's like, "Did you know you hit that car back there?" And I said, "No." And it didn't do any damage to either car, but I just apparently just bumped it enough that she pulled me over, and the sergeant came out, and he's like, "Oh, that's all right. I'm not worried about it. Take off, man. You're good." But I was like, I didn't do anything wrong until she came up to the door and said that. So I need a better camera, apparently. Now, I wasn't watching the camera. But anyway, Job says, look, I'm so confident. I don't mind. I don't care how much. I'm willing to answer any question you got. I'm willing to sit here for as long as you want. I will go through every ounce of accusation against me because I know it's not true. That's how he feels at the end of this. Verse 40. Let thistles grow instead of wheat and cockle instead of barley. The words of Job are ended. So Job says, I'm done with my defense. I've given you all that I can. And so he rests his case. He's hoping now to hear from the judge. When a judge has to make a ruling and everybody's there waiting for it, he's like, the judge is righteous. I know I haven't done anything, so bring it on. And that's the way he feels here at the end of chapter 31. Next week, for those of you who will be here, we'll start with Elihu, and we'll see the next few chapters with him. And hope you learned something. Besides that, I got pulled over in the Hazel Park Police Department parking lot. All right. Did I tell you that, Andrew? No, I didn't tell you that? Oh, man, I forgot he's in here. All right, let's close in prayer, and we'll see you on Sunday. All right, John Hunley, will you close us, please?